Hello everyone, this is Kay Gray. Perhaps you're wondering why I call myself the Autistic Shaman. I thought today that I would explain to you what shamanism means to me and why I think autism and shamanism are connected. For me, shamanism comes from the root to where my ancestry is from. I am partially Siberian. I'm fully Russian, but as much as someone who is fully American, my roots are from all over the place. People hear the word shaman and they think that it just means magic worker, but it does refer to the specific magic workers of Siberia, not of South America or Native America. But each tribe in Siberia has their own name for their magic workers, and they actually have multitudes of them. I've been reading this really amazing book called Shamans by Ronald Hutton. It's an anthropological look at the history of Siberian shamanism and magic. The most important thing that I've taken away from it is how long ago colonization happened and how deeply ingrained it has become. There are no original records from anybody that was truly Siberian writing about themselves. All the records that we have are from anthropologists that were Russian or from other countries who had the colonial mindset. So everything that we know is through that lens. And the cultures that remain today have all been altered significantly because the same kinds of genocide and boarding schools happen there as well. My father's side of the family had to move from one part of the country to another in order to escape genocide. My great-grandfather was murdered by the Chekisты, which was at the time a kind of Russian secret police. Someone told them that he was an enemy to the state, and they murdered him and his brother, possibly two brothers, and then later pardoned him 20 years later. His wife, who was at least partially Buryat and whose parents were from the Dauria region, had to take her 6 children and escape in the middle of the night somewhere, leaving behind her house and everything she owned. And after that, we lost everything that they had worked for to get to that point. My dad's father's side had to escape Ukraine because they were Jews, and Ukraine unrest continues into today. So I've only recently started to realize how all of this affects me. Growing up, I used to think that it was just some kind of ancient history, but now that I've learned how epigenetics affects you, but also how the actions of all of your family members roll all onto you, even though that I was planted here. I was born in the United States, but I have never been an American. What does all this have to do with shamanism? I have lost my roots. They were not just lost, but stolen. Everything that my ancestors worked for was stolen from them, and they had to leave their lands, and I'm the result of that, traveling from one part of the planet all the way onto the other side because of the oppression that still continues on that side of the world. I have no connections to my ancestry other than the ones that I make myself. I know that there are magic workers in my past because I am one. I use the word shaman because it originates, at least in part, from where my ancestry is from. And it gives Westerners a glimpse into how it is that I think. There's a lot of overlap between autism and magic. I'm going to read to you an excerpt from this book, which is actually pulled from some older historical documents. The journey of the animal double to the other world is described in the shaman songs as of such fantastic form, so deftly accompanied by motions, imitations of spirit voices, comic and dramatic dialogues, wild screams, snorts, noises, and the like, that it startled and amazed even this far from superstitious onlooker. The drum sounded ever more thunderously. The moment came when the song reached its highest intensity and feeling of anxiety. The drum moaned, dying out in peals and rolls in the swift, nervous hands of the shaman. Swaying from side to side, bending in a half circle to the ground and smoothly straightening up again, the shaman let loose such a torrent of sounds that it seemed everything hummed, beginning with the poles of the tent and ending with the buttons on the clothing. Screaming the last parting words to the spirits, the shaman went further and further into a state of ecstasy, and finally, throwing the drum into the hands of his assistant, seized with his hands the thongs connected to the tent pole and began the shamanistic dance, a pantomime illustrating how the animal double, accompanied by the group of spirits, rushed on his dangerous journey, fulfilling the shaman's commands. The drumstick in the skillful hands of the shaman's assistant beat out a furious roll. The accompaniment reached its highest point. The voices and snorts of beasts and the like were heard in the tent. Under the hypnotic influence of the shamanic ecstasy, those present fell into a state of mystical hallucination, feeling themselves active participants in the shaman's performance. The shaman leaped into the air, whirled in the tent thongs, imitating the running and flight of his spirits, reached the highest point of ecstasy, and fell, foaming at the mouth, on the rug, which had been spread out in the meanwhile. Excerpts like this tell me that there is a connection between autism and shamanism. The foaming at the mouth, that is an epileptic fit. I've actually started to realize that I think that I have seizures, and that those seizures are potentially portals through space and time that allow us to connect with spirit and with ancestors. The other day when I was meditating, I was thinking about connecting with my ancestry, and I felt this really overwhelming, like as though a light broke out of my head and out the sides of my face. That's not the first time something like that has happened. And when it does happen, it feels like I've been seized. And my breathing intensifies, and it's as though, I can't even describe it, as though I'm falling from the sky or being flung out into space. It comes with this intense amount of electric activity in my brain that I've tried to describe to people before, but I guess maybe they don't have any experience with seizures. I'm not sure. But the result after that is that I'm barely holding on to reality of the here and now, and interacting with people on a normal level is extremely difficult. It's painful. For me, it feels like it's a psychic opening, and I can't communicate on normal levels. Later that day, I had really good sex, and with the final orgasm, experienced a similar kind of seizing where I started to smell things that weren't in the room and to hear things that weren't in the room. And then my head was really dizzy for a really long time, and when it happens, like, I have to rest my head, otherwise it feels like it's wobbly and gonna fall off. And I'm really weak and just unable to do very much. The intense animal experience of shamans, as well as their physical difference in how they, like, these epileptic fits that they experience, it's all part of the same fabric. Magic workers have a history of guttural and throat singing and really primal movement, and that is also something that we see in autism. Repetitive motions are something that autistics do in order to calm themselves, because we have a lack of neurotransmitters, so the repetitive motion is how it takes us that long. Like, you might go like this and you get a good feeling from it the first time, but because we have a processing delay and we have a lack of neurotransmitters, we have to do this like 100 times before we get the same brain result that you do. So the repetitive actions are really just us processing the feeling that for neurotypical people happens right away. We see rocking and repetitive movements in so many religions all over the world, where it's either mantras or the bowing that Jews do. And I think it could very well be that autistics were religious leaders throughout time, and now that the tables have sort of turned because we're so logic-based that we've lost our spiritual roots, but also perhaps neurotypical followers were trying to attain that same kind of enlightened state. And I think maybe it's not even possible because we just have different brains. Autism makes it difficult for us to live in the here and now along with neurotypical people, but it gives us an insight into things that other people miss all the time, and to us it's obvious. So I have some pretty powerful lost roots that I am reclaiming, and maybe I'm using the wrong words, maybe I'm going about it the wrong way, but there is no path. The breadcrumbs have been eaten up and burned up and destroyed so long ago that I have no way back other than listening to myself. So I'm really grateful for anthropologists that are starting to now take a decolonized look at Siberian cultures. My personal roots are from the Buryat region that is east of Lake Baikal. I really want to go. I'm totally afraid to go. It's a scary, scary place going to Russia, but also Russia is really big. Since I was really little, I have been trying to reclaim my roots. I've always said, what is all this concrete? What are these noisy cars? Why are we not outside? Why are we not herding? Why are we not moving every 2 months? Because that's what's natural to me, is moving every 2 months. I have always been drawn to, how do you catch an animal? How do you skin an animal? How do you do things from the earth up? And I have always felt that everything is alive. A rock is not dead. There is spirit in everything. Both my grandmother and myself have never been disturbed by the cold. She swam among icebergs for fun until she was into her 80s. I'm definitely not meant to live here. And I mean, I understand when you're being chased from one corner of the earth to the other, that eventually, that's why my parents came here. But they lacked wholly any connection to earthly spirits and to the ways of living off the land. In fact, they always told me that was embarrassing. Like, people who are farmers are embarrassing. That's the lowest form of anything, the lowest form of humanity. So I'm glad that I've had resources here, emotional resources, spiritual resources, that have allowed me to begin to reclaim my ancestry. But I feel intensely disconnected from myself and from the way that I'm supposed to live. And I really don't know how to take the first step towards reconciling that. I've been pretty broken down by living in the wrong culture, and colonialism took away everything that my ancestors ever did, but it's still here, it's still in me, and I'm trying to access it as best as I can every day. Where is home? I don't know. People say that it's inside of you, but I think there is something about putting your feet down where your ancestors lived and worked that makes a lot of sense and feels like home. Thanks for listening.